Khefren, I really would like you to just introduce yourself because no one can introduce you like yourself. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your educational background, and what got you into the field of counseling.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So, firstly, thank you, Dentricia, for welcoming me on to have this conversation. It is truly a pleasure. So, pleasant good evening, everyone. So, my name is Khefren Sackey. I am from the U.S. Virgin Islands, specifically the island of St. Croix, born and raised. I currently work as a crisis counselor at Island Therapy Solutions on St. Croix. I also just graduated with my Master of Arts in Psychology from the University of the Virgin Islands. So I developed an interest in psychology because, from long, I've always been trying to figure out why people would do the things that they do. And in addition, growing up, I always saw things like conflict and like bad relationships all around, and I didn't really like it. So I decided I wanted to figure out how I could fix that. And so my goal became to improve the lives of others and organizations using those psychological principles.
That's really excellent. I know that we have few male clinicians in the region. So how is that experience like for you? Because you're a crisis counselor and you are serving you're in a high stress job and you're serving a population that really requires, attentiveness and, great care. How are you navigating the waters of being a male clinician within the Caribbean context, considering that mental health, we're still grappling with accepting it as something that is important?
So it's definitely been quite an interesting experience, especially throughout like my internship. I was able to intern at Island Therapy Solutions as both a psychological assistant and a psychometrist. So I would do things like administer tests and assessments, conduct initial diagnosis or intakes to just various people, and really had a lot of opportunity to deal with clients, especially males, with things like anger management and like PTSD and those types of things. My job as a crisis counselor is a little different in which this role that I'm at is in a grant that is federally sponsored through the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the US, or FEMA, as well as tech support from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA for short, to really provide our territory with free access to resources like stress management, coping skills, and a myriad of other psychoeducational topics. And definitely, you know, um, it's it's very interesting to see how some males, some of my brethren would handle, just different stressful things, primarily kind of being reluctant to talk about different things, and just an overall passive approach, you could say, before we interact with them in terms of how they just manage their stress and how they cope with it. So definitely seeing some pretty positive results thus far, though. So that's good.
That's really great. So let's dive into our topic for this evening. We hear a lot about substance abuse. It is spoken about a lot within our field, and I think persons within the community, they're aware of it, but sometimes we take a lot of substances for granted and think that they are not, we can't abuse them. So just from your experience, can you define, let's set the foundation, can you define what is substance abuse? And based on your experience, what are some substances that you have seen, especially men, abuse within the Caribbean?
Yeah, so substance abuse, we typically would define that as any sort of over reliance or overindulgence or dependence in an addictive substance, especially as it pertains to drug and alcohol. And when we think about that in within the same Caribbean context, you might see ever so often people using prescription drugs. I actually knew somebody that got pretty addicted to like opioids, morphine, and those types of things. But more so and more commonly, you would definitely see a lot of males indulging in alcohol and marijuana. Those are the two biggies for sure.
So even if you are up north in the USVI, down south as Guyana, it's a common theme: alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs. And I think within the Caribbean context, prescription drugs, I think it's something that we're slowly coming to terms with, that we abuse. We often think that it's the issue of another population in another region of the world, but it is abused within our region as well. And we have that fete culture in the
Yeah.
Caribbean, where carnival time, it is normalized to drink. If you're a working person, it is normalized to have your wine after a rough day. And if you grew up simply in just the Caribbean, smoking marijuana, especially as a male, is pretty common. So I'm happy that you would have shared that a lot of the things that we take for granted, they can be abused, if not monitored. Let's delve into the reasons why some persons are become addicted to drugs and others don't, because we know that some persons can drink alcohol and they do not become alcoholics, or some persons smoke marijuana and they do not become addicts, or they do not become addicted. So let's speak about the difference, so persons can understand what that looks like, and they can think about their own lives to monitor, am I addicted, or is it just a one-off thing?
Yeah. So definitely when we explore like reasons that some people might become addicted to drugs or some don't, there can definitely be a lot of different factors. But chief among them would be things related to like your upbringing and company and even like social and parental support. And so, you would often see those who might be lacking in that, especially in like childhood, might be more susceptible to engage in those things, especially, in terms of like peer support and those types of things. If you're surrounded by a company that drinks a lot or does drugs, you're a lot more likely to get yourself into that. Poverty levels are also a big factor in that, especially when we look at different statistics in the US, in which persons under poverty are twice as likely to engage in a lot of those different substance abuse habits, you know? And so those are really the big factors that go into that.
So I know there's a lot of talk about genetics. Is there a link? You mentioned risk factors. So you mentioned your upbringing, you mentioned poverty, that's a huge one. You mentioned peer pressure and that issue to start and to use. But should we consider genetics? And we're not even speaking about that nurture aspect, we're speaking about that nature aspect. So we're not speaking about you grew up in a home with someone who smoked marijuana every day and they abused it, or someone who an alcoholic father or parent. We're speaking about the genetics. We're speaking about that innate component of being an addict. Is that a risk factor as well, based on the research that you would have looked at?
It could definitely be a a maladaptive pattern that you can pick up it within like genetics and those things. But I would say, like, in like my teachings and just independent research, when we examine the whole concept of like heredity, even like specifically as it pertains to like the things that like we eat and like consume, we do see like the lifestyle factors and choices that we are exposed to really do play that huge role, especially as it pertains to reinforcing that sort of thing. So even going to like that same thing with like, your mom or your dad is as an alcoholic, it will definitely make you more likely to be an alcoholic as well. not just because of like the genetics, but also because of the environment, because those things, the nature and the nurture, do kind of like work hand in hand to create that environment.
That's really excellent. And I cannot stress this enough, but it's really important that we look at our upbringing. We look at what we were exposed to. There are a lot of things that influence us directly and indirectly. And sometimes we only realize that things affect us when we are in a certain situation, when, we are triggered in a certain way. So it's really important that, we self-reflect and we consider what we saw, what we were exposed to, and what might likely influence us toward a certain choice. Now, I want to speak to how can men know that they are addicted? What are the factors that men can consider to know that, hey, I may have an issue, I may be abusing this, maybe it's time for me to see someone? What are the indicators that you have an addiction to a substance? And when I'm just reinforcing, as we said, substance, alcohol, marijuana, those prescriptive drugs, those three that we see in the Caribbean.
Yeah. So when we think about like some of the indicators that you can spot, definitely a decrease in your personal social activity can be one. If you found yourself to be spending less time doing normal social activities that you're accustomed to doing, that your friends know that you're accustomed to doing, that can be an indicator. Um, Definitely an increased risk, like basically ignoring like different risk factors, things that you might have that you might have seen as risky. You're taking more of those different risks and just overall ignoring them. That is also an indicator. Certainly abandoning previous commitments that you might have had, just daily tasks or work or anything like that. Those are that is also a big indicator. And perhaps the biggest is establishing like a tolerance and like needing the higher dosages or stimuli to kind of reach the same feeling that you did before, and experiencing like those withdrawal symptoms, especially the physical ones. Where you might like have like cold sweats, blood pressure increase, those types of things, increasing agitatedness, those types of symptoms. Those are perhaps the biggest ones.
Okay, so now that's how men can know how they are, if they are addicted to a substance. So there is it's really important that we understand that it gets in the way of natural life, your everyday life. Khefren would have mentioned those commitments. You're dropping them. You're looking for, higher dosage. There's that level of tolerance, and so you may take, something, and you may want something to maintain that high or that feeling. And those are two that I think are really important. How can we as women, because we as women, we see our men utilizing substances. How can we, men may not be able to identify within themselves for whatever reason, denial or whatever reason. How can we as women spot that, hey, my partner might have an addiction and maybe it's time for me to intervene or to step in or to say something to him?
So some things, definitely, if you see that they're more partial to keeping secrets or outright lying about something, that is a telltale sign. Spending more time alone and away, the same thing we were just talking about with like decreased socialization. Another thing is like the extreme change in behavior or a sense of moodiness that you might sense from them. And even as something like if you find that you or him missing money or something like that, that is also a sign that you can look at.
And so we, as women, or if you're a male and your partner is a male, we truly have to be observant in our relationships, because there are telltale signs that suggest that our partner is struggling, and they may need some help with us, or they may need that professional help. So I want us to delve into what can a person do if they're doing that self-reflection and they know that, hey, I am abusing or I'm overusing a particular substance. What can a man do to get help? And I want you to speak holistically, because I know within our field we speak about rehab and that therapeutic help, but holistically, what can a man do, just from the self-help perspective to that professional perspective, so that he can understand that he has options.
Yeah, so first and foremost, just being able to become aware and admit that you are struggling with this sort of thing is a huge step. It's pretty much half the battle, because no change can be had unless you decide within yourself that, okay, this is what's happening, and I need to admit that this is happening. Once that you're able to do that, something that you can do is be able to tell a trusted friend, somebody that you know that is supportive and can help keep you accountable, because it's very important that you keep that accountability resource there as you delve into the self-help. So there are a lot of cool resources that you can find online that can really help, especially for those who want to delve into like different self-help things. My favorite website, as of right now, that I've found really great tools on for just different things, therapy and even self-help, is something called therapistaid.com. So therapist aid, it basically has a lot of different tools that deal with like things like stress management, anxiety, um, relationships. They even have some stuff there on like substance abuse, and like it's basically filled with like different worksheets that you can do to just find some stuff there that you can choose to do. And of course, being able to identify and be aware of your local resources is always a great idea. You know, I'm not too familiar with the resources here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm only familiar with St. Kitts counseling services. Um, but if they're more,
Yeah, so
you know,
so there's a counseling service. There's also a day-in center where you can go and get treatment, a treatment center, and that's pretty recent. And so there are two options. And I think a lot of times, persons are a bit ashamed to go in to say, hey, I'm struggling with alcohol, I'm struggling with marijuana, because it's so common within our community. And so we find that a lot of persons come in for others. So they come in for mental health and other mental health issues, anxiety, depression, the anger issues that you would have spoken about, relationship problems. And then we would realize and identify that they have a substance abuse addiction that is contributing to the fallout in their relationship or adding to their mental health disorder. So there are two insights that we can share with our audience after. But I'm happy that you would have shared local resources, because they are available even in this pandemic. They are available to help persons, and they also not even, in addition to that in-person support, there is that telepathy, there is that teletherapy, that, over the phone, over Zoom, that over WhatsApp support that is also available to men who need help.
awesome.
So I want to go back to, okay, so you mentioned there is that self-help aspect of getting, getting yourself together. So you're identifying, hey, I'm struggling. And then you find an accountability partner, and then you look at your resources that are available to you. Let's speak about, okay, so I've made that decision to get help. So whether it is rehab, whether it is, a therapist, whatever it is, you are seeing a professional to get help. Let's speak about recovery, because I think that there are a lot of myths around recovery. I think that persons think that if you go and you do a certain amount of sessions and you're over your addiction, it's gone forever. And when I was in Barbados and I volunteered at the drug abuse center there, I really truly appreciated that recovery is a journey, but it's a very difficult journey. It's a very painful journey, especially when you are coming off of substances that you are heavily dependent on. So speak to that reality, what recovery can look like, what recovery what it is, if it's a short-term thing, if it's a long-term thing, and if you are in the recovery process, when should you give up, if you should give up, or when should you just give yourself additional grace?
Yeah, so definitely work backwards. So you should definitely never give up. That's for sure. When it comes to recovery and whether like it's short term or long term, that definitely varies based on like how long you have been indulging in those substances, how intensely you've been indulging in them. But generally, it can be a lifelong journey, a lifelong process, and a lifelong struggle, because it's not just like a decision that you have made. It's a lifestyle essentially. It's kind of like the same thing as when you say that you go out like on a diet. It when somebody wants to make that change to like lose weight or do whatever, it shouldn't be like just like a diet. It should be like a lifestyle change, and changing that stuff as it pertains to you taking the substances and whatnot are no different. So it's a lifestyle thing. So it can be a lifestyle. It can be a lifelong thing. Um, was that all of the questions just now? I feel like there were three questions and I only answered two.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
did. So walk us through what rehab is like realistically for someone who is contemplating getting that professional help. So speak about the rehab aspect of it and the psychotherapy aspect of it, because there are two different things. They can be two in the same, but oftentimes within our islands, it's two different things. That short term and that long term. What can that realistically look like for a man who doesn't even have an idea about, when I show up, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah. So in the U.S., rehab would typically take place in about four phases generally. You would have the intake, the detox, the actual rehab that would entail a lot of the psychotherapy and the recovery process. So the intake is really where you're going to be creating that customized care plan within that thing. You're gonna be looking at your own drug use history, your family history of the addiction, if you've had any prior medical issues. All of those preliminary initial diagnosis will be done in order to craft that plan. The detox part primarily tackles the withdrawal parts, because if you're coming off of this thing, the withdrawal is going to set in. In the case of substances like heroin, they would typically what they would typically do is substitute the dosages that you've had with heroin with something else in order to ease those withdrawal symptoms, and then gradually lessen the dosages over time so that you can decrease your tolerance. And then while that's going on, this is where the actual rehab is happening. So they'll choose any one of the psychotherapeutic methods in order to help. One of the most successful approaches for therapy, not only just for substance abuse, but in general, is a form called cognitive behavioral therapy. And what that really is that it's an approach that helps to uncover, your negative thought patterns that might have influenced your drug use, or further to assess those thoughts and feelings head on. And so, CBT therapist might help anybody in recovery really change their ways of thinking and enable the fostering of different alternatives, positive reactions, and teach them to cope with any distressing emotions, cravings, or relapse triggers that might have been brought on from the absence of the drug, as well as reasons that they might have turned to drugs in the first place. And so the recovery process basically is, after like therapy is essentially finished, you would essentially be able to continue on with that healing, and just you building again your own solid plan of aftercare, and kind of setting up different like fail safes, especially using those cognitive behavioral methods, like, if I feel myself reaching to this point, then I will do this. That sort of thing that you would do. And you would have periodic check-ins by those people if their resources allow for that to happen. And you continue on life and just continue building on that.
So that sounds like a very intense process.
Yeah.
It's for, ideally a lot of persons get lost in the stages because it's an intense process. But, you're a clinician, and based on what I've seen and experienced, your clinician, your therapist, they are not judging you. They are not even saying, oh my goodness, he fell apart, he's not coming to session, I wonder what happened to him. I see him down the road, because our islands are small. So we might see something. We're not even thinking that. We are here to work with you because we understand that it's a lifelong process, and that grace is necessary, and each person comes along that process in their own timing. And so for you may just be at that stage where you're saying, hey, I need help. For someone else, you may say, hey, I need professional help. And you're in that detox phase where it's pretty intense for your body, or you are in that stage where you've gone through the rigors of detoxing, and you have that recovery support in your life, and you're making sure that your accountability partners are keeping you on track. But sometimes you're going to relapse, and you have to go back on that horse again to keep moving forward. So it's a lifelong process. And I think that is what persons don't appreciate. Especially us as partners. Sometimes we say, okay, you went to the therapist 3 times, 4 times, but what you've shared is it's more than 4 sessions. You know what I mean? It's more than 8 sessions. We would love that short-term support, but it is a lifelong commitment to healing. And so, that is why it's so important for us to really help younger men to steer clear of becoming addicted, because it's so difficult to become healthier once you are addicted. So I know that you've worked with, you presented to over 2,000 persons, you work with men all the time, that population. So I know that you are aware of strategies that work for men and strategies that men can incorporate in their life, no matter what their mental health struggle is. So can you share with me some practical things that men can do if they find that they are relapsing? So they are self-aware that they need help and they're trying, but what are some practical things that they can do if they relapse within their journey?
Yeah, so definitely the most important ingredient in that is being able to know your triggers, know the cues, essentially. I actually just spoke about this today on one of my Facebook lives that I do with the Community Resiliency Project. And I was talking about habit formation and those things. And a long time ago, I learned about this thing called a habit loop, which is basically a neurological loop that governs any habit that you do. And if you want to be able to change a habit or build a new habit, it's important to be able to know the elements of that. And those elements are the cue, the routine, and the reward. And in short, the cue is the trigger, like basically the thing that kind of elicits your desire to achieve that reward. It could be like a location, a time of day, a person, a previous action that happened, or anything of that sort. The routine is the thing that you do, to the behavior that you do to pursue that reward, which is that feel good thing that makes it worthwhile for your brain to want to do those steps again. And so when we look at like the relapsing, that can be defined as you wanting to pursue that old bad habit of wanting to go back to do the drugs thing. And so being able to identify your triggers and being able to experiment with new rewards so that you can substitute that old reward as well as your routine with a new reward is very important. In fact, on that same website, Therapist Aid, there within that substance abuse category, there is actually a habit plan that can be looked at if you want to engage in it yourself. And what it is basically it's like this two-step process thing where it you basically connect a new habit to an existing habit. And then in step 2, you look at ways in which you can reward success. And, it's basically like, you're saying like, after I do this existing habit, I might do this. So to put it in context with the drug thing, you might feel like that cue coming on that you want to like smoke or something like that. And so your routine might be, you might go and get, whatever materials and all those different stuff. That's part of the routine. So instead of doing that, how about, when you feel that urge, go and take a walk, go and exercise or something like that, and experiment with a reward. So instead of, the reward of feeling that feeling when you do the drugs, say, all right, when I do that, I'll reward myself with, some pizza or something. I like pizza. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. And, just being able to set those small habits to be able to build those new things, those small rewards, to build those new things. And that's just one of the ways that that we can look at it.
So I like that. So know your triggers. And that includes, again, being self-aware. So taking that time to observe your habits. And you mentioned something that I like, could be a location. Sometimes we think that a trigger can be a person, it can be, a work situation, it could be a home situation, but it can be a location. It could be a scent, it could be a sound, it could be anything that like forces you to want to engage in that activity. So it varies for all of us. And so we really have to do that self-reflection. I really love that because I think men think a lot. We women, we speak a lot. We do think a lot as well. But men are deep thinkers, and they take some time to meditate and to observe in their minds what is happening. So when you are thinking a lot, try to observe your triggers, your actions, and see if you can replace that with simple things. With simple things. Now, I want to just move into how men can have that conversation with, hey, to their partner. I'd like you to support me in this way. You would have mentioned that, they struggle with saying that they need help, and they struggle with getting help. Can you share from a male perspective how a man can go about that conversation with their partner?
Yeah, certainly. So much like with acknowledging that they might have a problem, definitely being able to acknowledge that it is a difficult conversation to have out loud, like literally telling your partner, like, there's things that I want to be able to talk about, but it's really difficult for me to kind of talk about it. Can really help to clear the air with that. In addition to being able to kind of request certain criteria from their partner, those being, kind of having like the patience and support as they progressively try to open up about whatever it is that they are talking about, and then allow them to be able to talk about it, one sentence at a time, literally. I've always in the past shared that with people, like if they want to talk about something but they don't know where to begin. I've always said, start with a sentence. I've even said start with a word, and it's usually so minuscule that once they begin, they just go. So literally just being able to start that one sentence at a time and allowing them to be able to talk and build about that, and not not being able not kind of like heckling them, like, because they've already acknowledged that it's a difficult thing, but definitely do maintain some level of like accountability, like, you can talk about it when you're ready, but remember that you wanted to talk about X, Y, and Z. So definitely for the men though, being able to acknowledge there's a difficult conversation and request that patience and support, and start one sentence at a time, and dedicate yourself to making that commitment to open up steadily and gradually, and it'll come.
Thank you so much for that. We are in a partial lockdown, as it would have started here on the island. And, I was listening to one of the radio stations, and someone would have mentioned that this partial lockdown is elevating all of our vices. And so we know that a lot of men are struggling emotionally, and they're struggling with challenges of all types. What can men do, in your estimation, to just make sure that they are not abusing the substances, even in this high stress time of this pandemic?
So I kind of lean towards the same ability to be able to know your triggers and stuff again, because you might find yourself in that same predicament where you might feel like you want to relapse, or that you can't go longer without depending on this substance. So definitely being able to turn to that, and specifically crafting a plan around that. This is where that thing comes in, where it's like, when I'm feeling like I get to this point, I'm going to do this, and then you set up your plan around that, and that will definitely be able to help with that. Especially when we talk about the same things with like the habit loop, and just being able to look at the cues. Remember any, like, whether it's a location, a time of day, a preceding action, other people, or an emotional state that you're feeling. So just being able to engage in that is very important.
Thank you so much. So it's important to create a plan, and that plan looks different for all of us. And so whether it is a plan with yourself, or a plan that incorporates your family or your partner, create something while you are restricted from going outside, to help to manage your emotions, and to keep yourself in check of the triggers that will, lean you toward abusing the substances. We speak about mental health in Be Well and Bloom. That's our thing. And psychoeducation has been our thing this year. I want to speak about substance abuse and mental health. That's a huge one. But from your perspective, how are they married? And what should men be mindful of, as it relates to both of them?
As it pertains to, you said, like the link between
Yes.
So mental health and taking drugs.
Yes.
So definitely, those who would have a poor sense of mental health can make one more susceptible to taking drugs, um, especially those who might have poor um, expressions or poor ways of executing, maintaining their mental health. So those who might not embrace in healthier coping strategies like engaging or leaning on your social support, talking, venting to people, and those types of things, they'll be a lot more likely to turn to drugs because it's like an escape. You know, you want to be able to run towards like that pleasurable thing. I always say that as human beings, we have two major motivations. That's moving towards pleasure and moving away from pain. Moving towards winning, moving away from losing, moving towards the positive, moving away from negative stuff, things like that. And, having the prospect of that short or like powerful and immediate thing it provides like an easy escape, you know, from reality, but hard to escape from that. So yeah, definitely having a poor mental health can make one more susceptible to taking drugs.
And not only can it make you a bit more susceptible, but it can also escalate your mental health challenges.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on marijuana being abused or an addiction. I know there's argument where persons feel that you can't be addicted to weed. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you can absolutely be addicted to weed. When it comes especially to the different um, symptoms revolving around like withdrawal and those types of things, we can see those things in different people, especially the agitation and those things. As much as like some of my own friends who engage in marijuana smoke might deny, I have seen them with my own eyes, literally agitated, saying to themselves and me, "Man, I ain't smoked for the day," and all of these different types of stuff. Like, how can you say that and not like admit that that is an addiction? You know what I'm saying? And contrary and much to their dismay, those things, marijuana can have different effects on your body that help to inform that it impairs decision making to an extent. If for those who smoke it with like tobacco and those things, it can affect your lungs, and so that also adds on to its addictive qualities. Even if it is accelerated by the tobacco itself, you're still addicted to the marijuana, the THC aspect of it as well. So, yeah, you can definitely be addicted to that.
Thank you so much for that question, Nigencia. And I know, I always say anything that impairs your mental faculties, and it doesn't always have to be negative. So anything that takes you away from the moment, from being present, has a strong capability of becoming an addiction. So, for us in the Caribbean, we know that marijuana, it can give us, take us away from our present situation, calm our nerves. It, reduces anxiety. We can feel, if we're depressed or we're sad, it can help us to get those endorphins feeling really great. So anything that alters your mind and your mood, that has a strong capability of becoming an addiction. And I think it's a struggle because, as Khefren would have shared in the beginning, that culturally, we see it all around us. Culturally, it is widely used throughout the region. And we know persons who are functioning, but we also know that there are functional addicts. And so we have to be mindful of that. That just because we see someone functioning does not mean that they are not addicted and the substance is not an addicting substance. That's a huge one. So thank you for that. Khefren, I want to just have you, if you can, just share, three, you mentioned mental health issues, 3 coping mechanisms, strategies before we end that men can really incorporate right now or tomorrow or the next day after to help to keep them level, especially within this time. Just 3 that they can walk away with from this session.
Absolutely. So a very easy one that anyone can implement no matter where you're at is exercise. Okay. Exercising is not something to be slept on. There is enough empirical data to support that exercise can help elevate mood, alleviate depressive symptoms, as well as anxiety and those types of things. It can really be a great substitute for a lot of the stimuli that you might feel for those things, especially if we look back at like the habit loop thing again, because the name of the game is to just be able to replace one stimuli with another, and exercise can absolutely do that for you. Another thing that you can do to help cope is writing in a journal. Being able to just create your own space to express your troubles and the things that you're just overall experiencing. A journal can be very therapeutic in and of itself. And of course, being able to, again, find somebody that you trust, that you can vent to out loud is always a good option. And you'll never go wrong by seeking out professional help as well.
I like those. And I'm particularly interested to see if men journal, because I know women journal, but I'm not sure if men do. But that's a really great one. If they do it in secret, please keep doing that. Yeah, that's a really great one. So what are your last words to a male who is struggling? We have one male here, but when we share it on our social media, they're listening to this. What recommendation, what suggestion would you give to a man who is struggling with substance abuse and addiction, and they're ready to give up, or they are fed up of relapsing, or they're fed up of disappointing their loved ones and their family and friends? What is your thoughts to that man?
So my preliminary thoughts or reactions is Rome wasn't built in a day. That's a pretty cliche but common and true expression to make. So long as you decide to maintain a small but consistent and positive and upward moving effort, taking it in small chunks, and just being able to identify where you want to be, being able to picture what that looks like for you in all life domains, and be able to kind of look at where you are right now. That way you've established your point A and point B, and just look at like the resources that you need to travel from point A to point B. You'll be okay.
I like that. You'll be okay. Yeah. And it's a journey. I want to thank you so much for sharing, for pouring. I know that, you do incredible work. You are changing lives. You are a king who we honor and we respect. And any king who is serving within the healthcare profession in any way or fashion is everything. So thank you for your commitment to the field, to men, and to our Caribbean region, and for pouring into our small community here. And hopefully when we share the rebroadcast, more persons will get something that can help them, especially within this time. Where can we find more of you? Where can we follow you? And, where can you would have mentioned that you do, Facebook lives or videos. Where can we continue following your journey as you are helping others?
Yeah, so right off the bat, my Facebook is my full name. So Khefren Sackey. You can follow me there. In terms of like my work as a crisis counselor, you will typically find me streaming daily on Island Therapy Solutions. The logo here that's in the back right here, the Community Resiliency Project, that is also a Facebook page in and of itself, and you will see either them or Island Therapy Solutions sharing my live, doing whatever. In my spare time, I also do things like writing resumes, proofreading, and coaching people career development wise. And that page is called Mind Hack Revisions. So it's Mind Hack, and then a hyphen, and then revisions. And so that's essentially where you can find me. I also have an Instagram too. I barely am on it, but I have an Instagram nonetheless, ksack_0402. That's really where I'm at.
Khefren, we'll be following you, and we know that your journey is just beginning. As a young clinician, we look forward to hearing more about you in the field, more about you within these parts, and even abroad, representing men of the Caribbean.